Hello everyone, we are back in my closet of a room today, and it's just a little one-on-one talk today, just me and you, which also means there's no one here to criticize my hot beverage choice, which is of course tea. Tea is much better than coffee. You saw my last video. I made that claim, and I will stand by that claim until the day that I die. So let's just start the video. Today's video is about meditation. I know I made a video about this several months ago, but since that last video, I've been reading quite a bit more on it and practicing it quite a bit more, and I think that I can make a better video on it. So the goal of this video today is I'm going to try to convince you to start meditating. Alright, let's just start out with the cold hard facts first, the scientific piece, if you will. So several studies have shown two particularly interesting things to me that I find significant. The first being that meditation has been shown to actually alter the physical structure of your brain. One study showed that in as little of 8 weeks, the brain has started to show a decrease in gray matter in areas related to depression and anxiety, and an increase of gray matter in areas related to learning and memory, specifically the hippocampus. Let me reemphasize this because this is absolutely incredible to me. In 8 weeks, you can physically alter the structure of your brain for the better by essentially sitting on the floor and doing nothing. The second scientifically backed benefit of meditating is the ability to change the brain waves on which your brain operates on. So, in normal life, you generally operate on what's called beta waves, which are essentially your thinking brain waves. It's your doing things. Meditation changes that to alpha waves, which are a more relaxed state. Now, this is fairly obvious in that most people know if you meditate, you're going to get relaxed. However, alpha waves have also been linked to immediate decreases in depression, anxiety, and an increase in creative thinking. So if you're in the business of making your brain better, which all of you should be, meditation offers both an immediate solution to making you feel better and making you more productive, as well as a long-term way to actually alter the structure of your brain for the better. However, I think there's other reasons that are even more profound than the scientific data as to why you should meditate. And a lot of those come from the philosophical insights that you can gain through meditating. Now, in my last video, I was rather skeptical of some of these insights, and since making that video, I've been fortunate enough to glimpse a couple of the ideas that I often read about. Now, let me be clear, I'm still fairly skeptical of the idea of full spiritual enlightenment. I think these ideas can be glimpsed, and these glimpses can be repeated and extended. I'm not entirely sure what my stance is on people who claim to be able to live in these extreme present moments continuously throughout their whole life. Obviously, this would be attainable by monks and people who spend the majority of their time meditating, but even then, I'm not sure if I'm totally convinced that piece is possible. What I am convinced of is that there are some very profound insights into the nature of consciousness that can be glimpsed through meditation. Now, in hopes of convincing you to start meditating, I'd like to at least attempt to share some of the things that I feel I've learned through meditation. Actually, before I get into that, perhaps I should explain why I'm trying to convince you to meditate in the first place. Recently, I've been rather consumed with the idea of trying to reduce suffering in the world. Again, not so far as a utilitarian stance on that, but in general, I think trying to reduce suffering is a decent way to try to live your life. And I think meditation is a very powerful tool to do that. It can reduce suffering in your own life as well as people around you, because you're going to be better equipped to deal with people around you. If you can convince one of the people you love to start meditating, it's going to be just a butterfly effect of reducing suffering around the world. So this video is very important to me personally because I think this is one of the easiest ways to at least make a dent in the suffering around the world. Okay, so the first insight, and this is something that I briefly talked about in my last video, is the idea of the present moment. Now, if you think about it, the past no longer exists, and the future does not exist yet. All that does exist is the present moment. So if we were living in the past or we're living in the future, we're not really living at all, because in order to fully live, we have to be in the present, because that's all that exists. So this idea of living in the present can be a source of a lot of joy and allows you to be a lot more compassionate towards others, and in general just makes life better because you're fully living it. So this is perhaps the most important idea, to me at least, about meditation. And what meditation does is it allows you to practice bringing yourself into the present moment and staying there for as long as possible. And obviously the goal would be to live in the present moment outside of meditation as well, but that takes quite a bit of practice. Now, a common criticism I get to this idea is that people will say, oh, well, I can remember things, so in that way the past does exist, or I can think about the future, so in that way the future also exists. But in either of these cases, all that's happening is you're simply having a thought, and thoughts arise in the present moment. So it doesn't matter what the subject of the thought is, everything still only exists in the present moment. Now, the second insight I want to talk about today, and this will probably be the last one I'll cover because this one can be kind of difficult to explain, and I'm certainly not the best at it. The idea of non-self. The idea we do not have a self at all. Now, what do I mean by this? In general, when we talk in everyday life, we will say things like, I ate a sandwich for lunch, or I need to go do homework. But who is this I that we are really referring to? I often pose this question to my friends, which is, what is the next thought that you're going to have? You don't know, right? Thoughts just arise. So if you're not choosing the thoughts that you're thinking, then who is? There is no thinker of the thought, if that makes sense. The thoughts are just arising and you are simply witnessing them. Another way to think about this is, if you try to point to the thing that you call I, whenever you try to do this, you won't be able to point to anything. For example, you can try to point at your body, but this is your body, not you. It's something that you own in the way that we speak about it. And most people don't identify as being solely their body either. So it's not their body, and it's not their thoughts either, because we just talked about how thoughts just simply arise. In that case, what other experience do we have? Everything is really just a thought, right? We're kind of trapped in our own heads, and our entire reality is being perceived through our sensory organs and producing thoughts and sensations. All of these are the same, but none of them are you. So you could perhaps say that I am the one that experiences these thoughts and sensations. However, to that I would ask you, are you experiencing the thoughts and sensations, or is experience in of itself simply the thought and sensation? You see, experiencing is just another sensation or thought. Having someone that experiences an experience doesn't make any sense. You can't point to that person because they don't exist. I should note really quickly that this idea is a non-dualist idea, in that it doesn't require the addition of a soul or a religion in order to work. This idea is purely based on logic, and I think that most ideas of the soul or a religion can fit into this idea as well. It takes a little bit of thinking about and work to get to that place, but it can fit in. So I'd like to take this idea even further. So if we say that consciousness is a product of the brain and resides in the body, and therefore you are at least somewhere inside this body, this idea also doesn't make any sense. And let me explain why. What is the difference between my body and this concrete pillar, for example? My body is made up of subatomic particles that are the same particles that this concrete pillar is made up of. And in fact, the air around me is also made up of these particles. So where is the barrier between me and this pillar? It's just a soup of subatomic particles that has different levels of organization, but there's no boundaries. It's subatomic particles, particles, particles. We're all part of the same thing. So that's another way of thinking about non-self. So if I were to say that I'm contained within this body, that's incorrect because there's no container. So then you could also say that consciousness is a product of organization, and that is the organization of the particles that make up your brain. And this could be true. In fact, it likely is. However, this doesn't necessarily mean there is a self, because an organization of particles doesn't exclude other particles. In fact, if everything is part of the same organization, there's just subparts of it. So in that case, there still is no self. Now, why am I telling you all of this? This seems like a purely academic question on the surface. However, it can alleviate a lot of the fear of death that a lot of people feel without the need for religion. Religion is typically the solution people use to alleviate their fear of death and the unknown. However, if I'm part of all of this, when I die, I'm still part of all of this. Nothing changes. There is no self to die, and there is no self to be born. Now, I realize that statement sounds a little far out, but it is true, or at least it makes logical sense. So this can alleviate a lot of suffering, anxiety, stress, whatever you want to call it, about death. Because, or actually, here, let me give you a metaphor that I read in a book by Thich Nhat Hanh. I'm probably misquoting this, but he essentially said that the wave does not need to be sad once it stops being a wave, because it was water all along. That's essentially what's happening in our world, right? Each of us are a wave in the ocean of everything. And once we stop being a wave, we're still part of everything. And in this idea, you will also see that every action you make affects everything, right? So this can make your life extremely meaningful, because you will see that everything is dependent on each other. All of your ancestors live on through you and through everything else they touched. You can see a car, and you can see, like, if you look deeply into a car, you see all of the people who created it, all of the people who worked on refining minerals. You see the history, both good and bad, behind the car, and that affects our life quite substantially, actually. The car that we drive today couldn't be there without the person who screwed in that one bolt. That one bolt is just important as the person who discovered the technology to build the car. So in this way, you can see how interconnected everything really is, and your life can become extremely meaningful. It can also remove a lot of the fear of death. So this idea of non-self is really powerful. In addition to that, how can you not be compassionate about those around you if you recognize that they're all part of the same thing? You look at your neighbor and you see them in you and you in them, right? I mean, I don't know what else could cause you to feel more compassion than that idea. So this insight can come, and you can feel it quite deeply through meditating. When the next time you meditate, try looking for the self, the person who experiences the things that you're experiencing. And I think you will find that there is no self. And when you experience that, even just for a moment, you touch this idea of interconnectedness and everything being part of one whole. And when you touch that idea, it's a source of a lot of joy. It may sound kind of scary at first when you hear about this idea of non-self, but I promise you it is not if you investigate it. So that about sums up the philosophical insights that I wanted to talk about today, in this video at least. I imagine this video is probably pretty long, so I don't want to do too much more. I hope this was enough to convince you. I hope you see that there's some quite substantial scientifically proven benefits of reducing stress and making your memory better, learning easier, all of those things, more creative. And there's also some quite profound philosophical insights that you can use to increase the amount of happiness you feel in life and be more compassionate towards those around you. So I sincerely hope you try meditating. 10 minutes a day is all it takes. If you say you don't have 10 minutes, you're wrong. We all have the same amount of time. We have 24 hours in a day. It's just a matter of priorities. And I would certainly say that meditating deserves to be one of your highest priorities. Equal, if not close to equal, as sleeping, eating, exercising. So give it a try for a month. Or if you really want to give it a try, do the 8 weeks so your brain actually starts to alter, and I think you will find that it'll be a source of joy in your life. It'll take some time to get used to, but after you get used to it, you'll continue to do it, I'm sure. Look up an app also, like Waking Up by Sam Harris is a pretty good app. I've heard good things about Headspace. If you're too intimidated to try just sitting down and doing it by yourself, those apps, I'm sure, can help you. So, until next time, see you later.